has the same, but I'm going to go ahead and just want to make sure that we're not missing anybody. So basically, I'm sharing my screen now just to show you. This was just a basic idea. We had a pre-meeting with Rebecca the other day, and we know what it's like to be sort of a fire survivor and have all of these questions, but also all this information coming at you. And so we're very happy to have this connection together, and some of the very most compassionate people who've been through what you've been through. So this is part of a community to community plan. And I see Antonia, that's wonderful. So basically we have people here from Paradise. We have, and they are almost 2 years post-disaster. Today is our 3rd anniversary of our wildfire disaster. And so we're entering into year 4 of recovery, and I'm gonna let that person in. And then I just wanted to lay out the priorities, and then I'm going to kind of let you guys take it from there, and I'll just guide you through it as best we can to make it functional and useful. I'm going to probably change to a speaker view at some point to make it easier to see for you. Biggest priority laid forth by Rebecca was to build trust. We all know that there's 3 types of people who show up after a disaster, and those who want to sell you something, those who want to defraud you, and those who actually want to help. And we actually want to help. We do not charge for our assistance. We just really believe that it's incredibly important to be there for your community. And you are now part of our community. Specific topics that we prioritize, it doesn't mean that you can't open it up to everything else, which is why it's great that we have a list of your questions. But maybe it gives us a place to start, which is, the first one is how to leverage the media in service to the survivors and the community rebuild, because we all know the bizarre experience of seeing newscasters everywhere in front of like a burning something, and seeing your own community on the news in that way is strange, and not in a good way all the time. But some of the people on this call today, especially with Coffee Park, have been really great at using the media in service to their recovery, and it's helped a lot. So definitely want to hear from them about that. And then you all wanted to know what do you wish you knew in month 2, and what mistakes were made and what triumphs did you have. We think it's very important to always say where we made mistakes or things we wish we would have known before or done differently. And then I'm hoping James has jumped on, but regardless, there's lots of people on this call who know how best to work at the public sector locally, statewide, and nationally. We actually do federal advocacy, which we can talk about in another call. And then we'll do a roundtable and next steps. So.
I'm sorry.
Just want to make sure that everybody admit all. We had 4 people in the waiting room, so I'm admitting all of them now. We're now at about 30 people. Rebecca, do you want to do some general introductions and then go into the trust part and start from there? And if you are not speaking, go on mute so that the review doesn't pick you up, especially if you're on an iPhone. That's not gonna work. Chris?
Yeah.
I'm going to mute you, okay? But if you have something to say, it's don't take it personally. I'll unmute you, or would that make it easier? Okay, thank you. All right, so why don't we start with Rebecca to introduce some of the people who are on this call and orient us, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great. I hope I can do justice to everyone who's on this call. I would say the first thing is just kind of the reason to bring us all together was I've witnessed Coffee Park, Coffee Strong, and just the way that you guys have somehow, I don't even know, in the wake of your own disaster and losing everything, sort of healed through coming together and sharing your process so vulnerably and powerfully. And kind of the rebuild that I watched happen in Sonoma County was so inspiring. And I just feel like This is a type of leader that I think nobody ever imagined being in, nor desired to be in. And yet you guys have really shown an example of what can happen when a community comes together and rebuilds together. And I feel like one of the things I'm really seeing is you guys are kind of holding this light up of on this journey so that we don't have to fumble and make the same mistakes. And it's been so helpful. And so in that, I'll just say that I know we have from our community here, the SLV community, we have Antonia Bradford, who has been she's someone that reminds me a lot actually of a lot of you at the Coffee Strong, and she and the few others that are here have been leading a group, the SLV for home loss, and basically sharing their process as they've been living it. And what I've really found is it's one thing to listen to leaders and FEMA and people who are working at the county, but it's a completely different thing to hear it from a lived experience, which all of you have. And so my goal is kind of to get out of the way and allow survivors to connect directly with survivors here. And so Jennifer Gray has been just incredible. She's with Rebuild NorthBay, and she's worked really closely with the Coffee Park over the years. I think Molly McCurley is here as well. And if I remember, she's also with Rebuild NorthBay. We have Ann Barber, who is with Coffee Strong. She lost her home of 28 years in the Tubbs fire, and she's been an incredible resource to our community. Has just continuously been willing to answer calls at all hours of day and be able to support us. Steve Rahm, from president of the Coffee Strong, he also lost his home in the Tubbs fire in 2017. I believe he's also a builder, and a lot of his experience that he's been able to guide us through in the building side of things has been really incredible, as well as working with local government. Charles Brooks from Rebuild Paradise, Valerie Brown from United Policyholders. Some of you have seen her locally working with us already on the ground. Renee Van Heel, also working with United Policyholders. And she also lost her home in San Diego wildfires, rebuilt from the ground up. And James Gore, who may be able to be here from Supervisor District 4, he's been supporting us, kind of nudging actually on the back end, and helping us to get some of our own supervisors moving, and so grateful for him. And then Kyla Waltz from Paradise. She is also, I believe, here, and I might be missing some people from other counties as well. With a bang on the ground, it sounds like from Wildfire Protectors are also here, Tiffany, Victoria. There's many I'm forgetting to mention, and so I'm gonna hand it over to keep us moving forward.
Maybe what we can do is we can start with, so one of the things is we sent out the bios because we weren't sure if you all wanted to go around and do intros, but I do think the intros are actually really helpful. So if you need us to back up at any point or provide more context, we're happy to do this. We usually do this sort of thing in person, so this is certainly quite different. But I think we can manage this. I will be there in person around the 19th, but maybe we can start with just answers to some of the questions and start with the media question first. And maybe Steve, you can take that, and then Charles from Rebuild Paradise, if you're okay with that order.
Sure. Hi, Steve Baum. And thank you for inviting us to participate in this. I know it's hard, and it's kind of ironic that we're all here after 3 years, and here we are looking out the window, because it's been a long journey. I just want to say that, you know, as far as the media goes, especially with what we had, we were fortunate, but also unfortunate because we were the kind of the only game in town. You know, our fire, when it happened, there were other fires locally that were all part of the same kind of event. And so we had a lot of ability to use the press because they wanted to know what's going on. With your fire, there were so many fires going on at the same time. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to get the support. But, you know, reach out and try to find a reporter that is engaged, has some skin in the game. Somebody, if they lost their home, that's going to be your biggest advocate. You're going to have to advocate for all yourself and work as a team. If you can find that one reporter or that one paper that really will support you, it's immensely important to keep your name in the media. Every time that your name is in the media, every time that the fire is mentioned, there's somebody that's looking at that newspaper. The amount of grants and donations that we got, and I'm going to jump into that a little bit just to say that, you know, some of the things you talk about on your question, especially funding, where to go for that, a lot of that will come to you. A lot of people, you're going to have to make an effort to reach out to some of these people, but we have found that as long as you're in the media, they come to you. I've just because it's a 3rd year anniversary, I've been on the phone for the last 2 days answering the same questions, and it's good to be there because that's how you guys found us, is because we were in the media. And so I think that by having that, then the politicians, the elected officials, they see that and they want to be more supportive. So it kind of snowballs.
And Steve, maybe you can speak to how to avoid, like, what if you're getting bombarded with questions? Like, I had the Chronicle call last week and try to talk me into saying that that our property values were plummeting and that we were all fleeing California. And I was like, so none of that's true. And some people may not live deeper in the woods, but my property values are skyrocketing because of COVID and everyone's coming here to do pandemic, which can't be that different from Santa Cruz, actually. And so there are some tricks like writing it out, or do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like, what if we're trying to force you into a narrative? How do you?
A lot of it is just, you know, if you stay prepared and you stay informed, you know, we were lucky. There's a lot of people, Annie, Pam, that are on this call. We were here from day one. When the first week and a half after the fire, we sat in a church and someone came up with the name Coffee Strong and someone bought it right there online. So you have to kind of make sure that you're all projecting the same information. I think with our situation, it was a little different because we're very urban. We're not spread out. We didn't have a huge tree problem like Paradise did, like Charles, and big pieces of property in Coffee Park. So our dynamics were a little bit different. I think they were a little bit more easier to contain. And so making sure that we all were saying the same information is really important. The media will try to get a story out of you, but we were very fortunate, like I said, to have reporters that weren't sensationalizing us. They wanted to speak the truth. They wanted to support us. So we were lucky to have 2 really good reporters that helped with us. But they'll try to guide you for a story. And, you know, some of it is a story and some of it is the truth. But collectively give the same information.
Thank you, Steve. Charles, go ahead.
If I project for just 1 second, this is Annie.
Hi.
And Rebecca and I have discussed this a little bit, but I think Jeff started out as our original spokesperson and kind of gave us the guidelines by doing it. And I think, Rebecca, that's something that you probably need to take on and set the tone. I think that's huge. And then as people become more comfortable, you have trust in what they're going to say, that will evolve also. That's it.
Well, and I love Pam's comment in the chat section. She said, you know, you can drive the narrative. You can drive the narrative. And I knew, for example, that there was a need to replace this wall at Coffee Park because Coffee Strong was driving the narrative and it was on the front page of our regional newspaper. So it not only led to it leads to more funding and more assistance in a very tough funding place. And Steve, by the way, was the project manager for that, did that and rebuilt his house and supported his family full-time job. So I would just like to shout out to Steve. And okay, Charles, do you think you could jump on and talk about the difference or your experience with the media post-disaster and now over the past 2 years?
Yeah, I think I saw Noelle had a question down there. Are we open to taking questions midway through?
Oh, totally, yeah.
My question is this. Hi, I'm Noel from Davenport, and I talk to the media a lot, and I always follow up with an email going over my points so that they have that basis. So I think that's a really important thing to do. But what my question was so after the fire, for how long does the media interest? I mean, isn't it, you know, they're interested in the fire, but how long afterwards?
As long as you stay in the news, they'll be interested. You almost have to get their interest and keep their interest. So for us, it was easier because we were a huge, densely populated area,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a story all the time as to what was happening in Coffee Park. I mean, we had a pretty phenomenal fire, so you continue it and you continue to feed it. I mean, we have different news groups that I have no problems reaching out to and saying, hey, this is what's going on over here. Or, you know, could you cover a story about this really crappy builder? You know, can you look into that? Stuff like that, where you get a relationship with them. And so when they need stories, they are reaching out to you.
All right, one other question for you then. Is it print media or TV?
All the above.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add, it's also national and regional and local too. And so Charles he can definitely speak to this as well, especially in a mountain community too.
So I don't know, national, but Curtis Alexander from the Chronicle used to live here in Santa Cruz.
Oh, emotional connection. So helpful.
Yeah. So there's that. And so anybody needs his contact information, I have it. I worked with him on the Lockheed fire.
Thank you.
So,
Charles,
Pam.
hand up.
Oh, I was just going to say that the more you get those human stories and get them in print is helpful, because human stories that tug at your emotions, whether they're high emotions or low, are what you need when you go to meet with legislators as well. You need those human stories to draw upon, and at a moment's notice, sometimes it's hard to gather all those. And so touching at people's heartstrings is a great thing, but then always have an idea of what your key message is as well.
Pam, that's, Kristen is pointing to somebody. Is there another question? Oh, it looks like Antonia. Can you, yeah.
Thank you. I was going to ask this question later, but because the topic of media is being brought up, I'm wondering what successes people have had using media to pressure their counties to reduce or eliminate permitting fees. You know, we have a unique, well, maybe it's not unique to us, but you know, a lot of these people that live up here, I'm really concerned they're not going to be able to rebuild because of being underinsured and because the fees are still pretty large. In addition, a lot of these roads are going to have, you know, tons of permitting done. And so it's going to be cost prohibitive if the county doesn't work with us. And my instinct is to bring media to try to pressure them, because I've been paying attention to the supervisors meetings and they've been a little useless as far as I'm concerned. And I feel like a media spotlight would be a useful tool, and I was wondering if anyone had experience with that.
So I can speak specifically to what you're referring to in permit fees and kind of answer that, the permit fee section later and media spotlight. My approach and what I learned from Jennifer and what a lot in our community is very large. The number of impacted people was very significant. So I'm one voice of many. And if I haven't seen Kyla yet, but if she joins, she started a group very similar to Coffee Strong in our community. But on media, consistent messaging, knowing what that is and having somebody that is your go-to, unless you're telling your personal story, having somebody that is ready and prepared, because reporters are going to be all over the place. And when they ask questions that you're not prepared for, it's better to either have somebody that you know that you can refer them to, or just don't answer that question, so you don't potentially put yourself in a position where you're giving out information that the reporter's going to run with and sensationalize because you were maybe taking a reach or guessing a little bit at that. So in opportunities to be interviewed by the media or from different people, I always made sure that if questions got beyond my knowledge, I went through my mental Rolodex of who I knew that would be a good person to answer that. And I would mention them by name and their organization during the interview, because chances are they're not going to run that in the story if I answer that way. We unfortunately have the moniker of the most destructive wildfire in California history, from number of lives lost and homes and everything else. And it has kept an unbelievable amount of tension on our community. And there have been documentaries and sensationalism. And one thing that I would suggest that you are all cautious of is who you let in your front door. Do some research beforehand. If someone requests an interview with you, I don't feel that all media is good media. There are people who could not understand why I wasn't willing to do an interview at 9 p.m. when I have 2 kids and a wife, and we're trying to recover in our 2 weeks after the fire, and they want a story and they want me to meet them somewhere in front of my property or something like that. And when you start figuring out what they're after, try and get some idea of what story they're after. But good media use will benefit you in the long run, from fundraising for whatever organization or wherever you're trying to drive funds. The media will be very helpful in keeping that attention front and center. Getting to know a few reporters is key. When we have new projects that are part of the long-term recovery, we have those reporters in our context, and we'll reach out to our contacts. We'll reach out to them and let them know about that, and they follow up. And we have certain people that are following along to see what is our community doing, because they're genuinely interested in that human interest story. And I think it was Anne that mentioned stories are critical. And if you have somebody in your community, in your organization, that has a knack for storytelling and can start to create the hope and inspiration in your community and highlight the good that's going on, because the media likes nothing more than to highlight the bad. And as much as you can drive that narrative and be able to create content and share it in other ways that maybe the media isn't willing to, that is very helpful in the long-term recovery. And more than anything, just be careful of who you talk to and who you let in your front door. I think I just kind of want to leave it with that.
And one way to tell your own story, Charles, is that they do little vignette videos on people who are rebuilding in order to highlight families, to build more community. So if you look at his social media, they've been very good at that.
So Jennifer, one other thing I just realized in regards to putting pressure on policymakers, learning from Jennifer, our approach, at least from our foundation, was always, we want to be collaborative with our municipalities, both the county and the town. We have a town within the county, and we have unincorporated areas and incorporated areas. We were always focused on the collaborative approach and getting to know those policymakers. And if we're at an impasse, try everything we can before putting media spotlight on them, because you will quickly create somebody who will not work with you if you put them in that awkward position. Sometimes that's necessary. But I would try as much collaboration and advocacy. And when we get into debris removal, I'll highlight a few areas where collective community advocacy is very, very, very important.
That's actually such a good segue into, we can keep going into media, but I would say that the more you collaborate with your public officials and call them in instead of calling them out, the more success you're going to have, because they are your partners in recovery. And I know that I worked for the county of Sonoma when I worked for a county supervisor when our disaster happened. And I saw what happened internally in the public sector, and that was that the trauma was real for the people who were also working in the public sector, and some of the elected officials were very traumatized. And in Charles' case, they also all lost their homes in Paradise. So what, you know, you have this disaster, and then everyone looks at the public sector and they're like, oh my God, we're traumatized, fix it, and keep doing everything else you're supposed to do. And then the public sector tends to contract into themselves and get defensive almost immediately, like in the stage that you're at right now. However, the good news is that your supervisors have lots of precedent for you know, elimination of those fees, or reducing them all the way down in order to, you know, get people to rebuild. I think Paradise is something very similar. It's not unusual at all. And I think for the LNU, I think for the Lightning Complex Fires, they've probably already requested and gotten a 90% reimbursement rate from FEMA, as opposed to the typical, you know, FEMA pays 75%, local government pays 25%. And so until they get that, they're worried about reducing their fees, especially if they don't already have a lot of money. So I'd be curious to know, and I'm happy to talk to you offline too, what their barriers and their constraints are, and why aren't they jumping over themselves to reduce the fees? But calling them out on media would be a last resort.
And
for sure.
Jennifer, this is Valerie. In that it probably is an education issue. They haven't stood up the long-term recovery group. I know I was working with the building department at the very beginning, just trying to figure out how to set up the LAC and all of that stuff. So there's an education curve going on, and they're learning as quickly as they can. So just because it says right now they're going to require the fees doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go there. And so part of it is just gathering, like they said, making them a partner, you know, documenting, you know, what that's going to cost. And then as Jennifer said, you know, kind of pushing and prodding them to give them the information they need to make that case to FEMA to be able, because the CZU is going to be, it's a different disaster, and they might not have bumped it up to the 90% yet. It might still be at the 75. And they might not know how they're going to get their match. That's another problem. And that match can be from volunteer organizations, in-kind donations, all of those things count, but they don't have that big picture awareness yet, would be my guess.
Do we want to close the subject on media and move on, or does anybody have questions still about that? I mean, you can always call. One of the goals is to build the relationship. So any of you feel like you can call anybody else on here and just ask them a quick question. The first year after Paradise, Charles and I probably talked 4 or 5 times a week, all the time. And it wasn't like long conversations. It was like quick questions. Okay, in, out, done. And it was very helpful for my perspective. It was helpful for us as well. And then he did totally innovative, different programs that might be really helpful for you. But do you have any more media questions? You good? Okay, and Antonia, would you like us to go right into working with the public sector generally? What the different experiences have been, and then we can come back to the other since we're already there, and then maybe. I'm curious, like, do any of you know your elected officials? Are they people who are present in your community? Did any of them lose their homes? So that would be helpful to know.
So for us in our district, we have Bruce McPherson. I honestly only saw him here when Gavin Newsom came to tour Big Basin. That's really the first time I was aware of him being active in the community. I personally don't know if he lives in SLV, and I have not seen him indicate that he lost his house at all. I guess for me, just because with the group that, you know, I started, I'm starting to see an uptick in people that are really, really concerned about being able to rebuild. Like some people in our community are really starting to panic. And so instinctually, I'm like, okay, well, how can I help? I really want to apply pressure, work with public officials. I kind of come in like a bull in a china shop. Maybe that's not the right approach. It doesn't sound like it's the right approach. But I just want to know the best way to kind of massage that situation, because I want to be able to have some results for people that are struggling with all of this in that regard.
So I heard somebody say something on a meeting the other day that we were on with Rebecca about the ecology, and Chris Grable said one of the things that happens in the trauma of undergoing, experiencing a disaster is you want to fix everything too. Like you want to like make it better, and also because your heart is so broken, and you're like, oh, okay, can I do it? Can I find the right person to do it? And that is actually how it gets done, but it's also like to take very good care of yourself along the way is incredibly difficult, especially the first year. We always feel like you're still on fire, and it's it's a very strange thing to live, and it's why we don't hire anybody at Rebuild who hasn't experienced the disaster, because like you can't explain it until you've lived it. And so I think your direction is absolutely spot on, that you want to make, there's a way to do it, and you're just like, how do I do it? Because I'm willing to do it. You just tell me what to do and I'm going to do that. So I would love it if if somebody from the survivors group wanted to speak up. I have a lot of experience with the public sector, but I know that from a community standpoint, like with Steve Rom, he may or some of the Coffee Strong people may want to weigh in. I know that the first day I met Charles in Paradise, the fires were still burning, and I was meeting with the mayor and the town manager. And I specifically went to them first and brought him into the meeting just to start a tone of we would be collaborative and we would all work together, and this is how we were going to get this done. I've worked with communities that built a lot of hostility between the public sector and, sorry, my husband just got home. That there was a lot of hostility between the public sector and the people trying to recover, and it was just dysfunctional. It made it so much more difficult. So I would say, pick up the phone, call him. He is your supervisor, and just say, would you come and meet me on my land and walk it with me? Like, come walk with me. Like meet them in a human place. And then talk to them, but it's okay to say, this is scary to me, because people do panic. And that's actually one of the things I would like other people, other survivors, to talk about is the panic. You're right at that month 2, which brings us actually to question 2, is when the panic sets in. And that's when you're very vulnerable to people who will commit fraud.
Yes.
You have to be very careful. So go ahead. I'm going to go on mute.
So this is Annie. Everybody gets to that stage pretty quickly of, oh my gosh, can I rebuild? Do I have enough money? I need to find a builder really quick. How do I facilitate that? It's a marathon, folks. They're not going to have the answers for you today. It's a process. So as you learn, the city has to learn also. Thankfully, they have these people around who can consult with them, quite frankly, people from our sector. And it's good to get together with these people and let them know, the officials, to let them know what you're trying to do and what the community is asking for. And they may not have an answer for you today or tomorrow. It may be next month. But believe me, they'll start working on it. And I think that that's huge, that you just need to, the people in the community have to understand. And we were fortunate as Coffee Strong, because one of our successes was that our community bought into what we were trying to do. So I think that as your community understands that you're working on this, if you can relay that to them over and over and over again, that you're talking to these people, that will be part of the foundation. And that the city needs people to come back. They need the property taxes. They need the community. There's a lot of advantages for them to make this feasible for you guys. So just know that will come together. You just need to be a little bit patient on that.
So you guys, this is Renee. I got on late. Sorry about that. I had the wrong time down, but I'm a fire survivor from 2007 in San Diego. And some of the stuff, when people are saying, I don't know if I can rebuild, I think we need to dissect it and ask them why do they think they can't rebuild? Is it the funds? Is it emotionally? You know, is it the stress? Is it because you have kids and you have a job and you don't have time? And we did that with our Fired Up Sisters group. We dissected it and helped people figure out what is the real issue, why you think you might not be able to, or is it, you know, all the different upgrades and things. There's so many different reasons why people don't want to rebuild. We had women in our group that sold their property and never rebuilt. We had, you know, all different types. And I think it's helping them calm their minds down enough so that because right now it's way too overwhelming and they need to calm their minds down. I always tell them, get a notebook that has at least 5 different sections in it, and let's figure out how you're going to rebuild, what you need to do. But I agree with you. You don't need a builder right away, but they think they do, because we do not know what it's like to have to rebuild when this happens to us. So I just really want to encourage people, if you're working with people and they're saying, I don't know if I can rebuild, ask them questions. Why don't you think? What do you think it entails? And everybody's here to help. So it's not as overwhelming as they think. Yes, it's overwhelming, but not quite as much. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
Jennifer, can I jump in here?
Please do.
Yeah, Renee, that's a really good point. When you haven't started debris removal, but insurance companies, if you have insurance, are hollering at you to start figuring out what's going on, what are you going to be doing, what about this, what about that? Those claims can stay open for a very long time. You have time. Our home is not rebuilt and our fire was almost 2 years ago. We're halfway there. And I will tell you that I hope that in your area, a lot of effort gets put into the long-term recovery group. It has been very, very successful in our area, and it just evolved into what's called a collaborative, away from the FEMA model of a traditional long-term recovery group. But that is where we saw the intersection of our local supervisors showing up. It was where the chief operations officer for the county, I think that's their title, and their assistant was regularly at housing committee meetings. And now you start to see the different groups that are showing up from nonprofits, faith-based, government agencies that are going to tackle certain parts of your community's recovery. And this is where you can build coalition. This is where you can build advocacy. This is where you can meet other people who will help you maintain the pace that all of you are going to need to get through this. Because right now it looks like everything needs help and you want to help. And everything out there is a problem. And I will tell you, to this day, 2 years later, there's stuff that comes up and it's like, I could definitely do that, but am I best positioned to do that? Where can I really, truly make a difference? And a lot of times at these collaborative meetings and these organizations is where you start to see that. And I will say that reestablishing community, what Coffee Park did, and the block captain system, and what we did with the zone captain system that Kyla, if her contact information is in here, I would encourage you to reach out to her. Rebuilding community for fire affected people is unbelievably important, because what will happen is if you have one supervisor and you have 100 people sending that supervisor the same question or that has the same concern, it's really hard for them to be able to address that. But if you do the model, and you know, Steve, I don't want to step on your toes here, Pam and Annie, I don't want to step on your toes, but having citizen representation and 1 or 2 voices carrying those same questions and those same concerns to the public, to the public sector is going to be more powerful, because you have the weight of the community behind you and they're going to listen to that voice. So I think I kind of want to they can explain it much better than I can, but it was invaluable in our community, the trust that was developed between local and regional leadership and our community, because there was an organization that was helping the community's message be heard and information flow.
Well, and this is Renee again. I totally agree with that. It's what saved me and helped me compartmentalize stuff, because it is so overwhelming. You have to count on these people, but you also, and I'm going to say it again, I have never journaled. I would never write in notebooks. I had people give me a notebook and say, get it out of your head and put it down. And then as you start getting together in these groups and plugging into all of this, you will know how important each one is. Because right now, everything's important, you know? And I had a friend that asked me what she could help with, and I didn't know because you're so overwhelmed. And she saw my boys wearing the same shorts to school every single day for 2 weeks. So she finally says, Renee, I'm gonna go shopping for you. I'm going, awesome. But that was not even on my list of things to do because everything else was so overwhelming. So just get it out of your head, put it in a notebook, but count on these people. And you know, the hardest thing that I had to learn was to allow people to help. I never had anybody help me before. You guys, when someone says, what can I do to help? Open your notebook, say, okay, I need help with this.
Good.
You know? So I really want to encourage you, plug in, but also allow people to help because they want to, but they just don't know what to do. And sometimes you don't even know what to ask. So you pull open your notebook and say, okay, pick something on this list that you want to do. And that's how I started getting so much help with what you are all going through right now. We'll never forget what it's like, ever. So we're here to help.
Noelle, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention to Antonia, you know, that maybe instead of just waiting for Bruce McPherson, you should talk to J.M. Brown, his analyst, who's fabulous, who's a great guy. He used to work for the Sentinel. And we have a very close relation, or I've had for the last 10 years, a great relationship with the Coonerty's office, first Neil and now Ryan. But my person that I go to, you know, that I talk to most of all is Rachel, his analyst, because Ryan's overwhelmed. But you're absolutely right, Rebuild Paradise, that you do need community people. And Ryan's office turned to me and said, who can I have represent Last Chance? And so we have a representative from Last Chance, and I see also Sharon here, Tony, and how about Swanton? Well, Katie is here and Hannah. So we have representatives who have lost their, and Kay Todd, thank you. And we have representatives who speak for those communities because my house did not burn down. I'm in downtown Davenport. So it's more important to have those neighborhood connections. And as you said, not have so many voices talking to the supervisor, but a couple of key figures in the community.
If I can also emphasize, never underestimate the value of knowing staff. Knowing staff is huge. You know, we work with federal electeds too, and our staff relationships are the ones that we maintain most strongly, and that's how, and they do a huge amount of work. And so they're also at a supervisor level, they wouldn't normally, like, it's harder to say come walk with me, but they will be that person who sets up the meeting for that supervisor to come and walk with you. It does make a big difference. And compartmentalizing is great. Remember, I started saying almost immediately, there's enough disaster for everyone. So, you know, you can find a lane, and then you might even find tensions. Charles, can you address though, like when you guys left the convening with us and set up your zone captains after meeting with Coffee Strong and Mark West, there was a little bit of resistance though from the city, like nervousness, like what are these people going to try to do? And you were able to overcome that. But can you discuss that initial?
Yeah, I also really quick want to say that getting to know your local assembly person and your local senator for the state level, as well as the federal level, their staff, they're the ones who are going to be at all the meetings, not those electeds. They're the ones that you want in your back pocket. You want to have great relationships with them. You want to know everything you can about them and be a collaborator with them, because they're the ones who are going to get stuff done and get their bosses to pay attention and do stuff. When we left the convening with Rebuild North Bay, with this idea of the zone captain system, Kyla Awalt, who came with us, she was fired up the whole drive home. She was calling people she knew to get this started, because the value of rebuilding community, even though you don't have houses, you meet on the street and you have barbecues at the park, and you start figuring out who can talk by who talks by phone, who communicates by email, who communicates by Facebook, and organize your community in a way that makes sense. We had evacuation zones. Our community was set up into evacuation zone, and each zone had a zone captain or a co-captain. That captain collected the information from the residents that participated in this program, collected all the questions, and all the zone captains got together and say, okay, who has the same question? And then that list of questions then went to one person who spoke with, at that point in time, our town manager, and then also the county representative for the zones that were in the county. Initially, our town manager was very skeptical of all of a sudden this new civic organization that popped up overnight that all of a sudden wants attention and wants a seat at the table. Like, who are you? What are you talking about? We're trying to figure out how to get debris removal done, and you want a seat at the table. So I would say that within your group, as you guys are rebuilding community, figure out those people that really their skill set is diplomacy, collaboration, the people who can get through the tough conversations as best as possible without getting there. It's so hard because when you're going through this and you've lost everything and you've watched your community get destroyed, it's hard not to either be emotional or you know, when you come to conversations, but you've got to find the representation to interact at that level and bring the voice of the community with people that can focus in those type of conversations and do their best not to just go to the emotion side, but kind of like get through it, and really build those relationships. It's a lot of give and take, because if your leadership and your the folks in your you know, in your town and county, they don't know you yet. You've got to build that relationship. So if you go in there with this, hey, here's what we're doing, here's who we represent, we want to create a system that allows you to get good information flow, hear the concerns of your community, and also give you a way to disseminate information that you know is going to reach many people in the community in the message, and the message is delivered in a way that you feel comfortable with.
Thank you. And don't ever, and Charles, what did you do before you dedicated your life to the rebuilds? I have a point to make here. What did you do for a living?
Oh, thanks. I was a bag salesman. I sold reusable bags. So not exactly a sexy or exciting career in the world. So this was not any place I ever expected myself to land.
No,
in a million years.
Community, it's because it impacted your community. Yeah, I was the Free Girl Scout troops, doing homeschooling, doing all this stuff, and suddenly I'm running long-term recovery center for multiple years. And
do not underestimate your abilities as an emergent leader. It matters. If your heart is in it, and if you're willing to, if you love your community and you're willing to do it, then it's incredibly important. And Steve, I'm hoping to go to you next, but I think Noelle had her. Did you have your hand up, Noelle? Should I go to Steve next? But don't underestimate your abilities to lead your community out of this. It's very important. It matters. Steve?
Yes.
Wrong. Will you come on camera and just speak to that and how you worked with the public officials? And I mean, it helped that your cousin happened to be the supervisor, but not everybody can have that happen to them. But you do have an unusual supervisor who. Oh, Big Steve's talking to me. Go ahead. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just reinforcing everything that Charles just said. I mean, I remember when we went up to Paradise Charles the first time and we met with, I can't even remember his name, your supervisor that lived in.
Michael Zalids.
No,
Doug Teeter.
Doug Teeter. We were there. I'm trying to think of how soon we were there. We were there in February, so a couple months. And he sat there and said, "We've got this handled." We sat at the table. "We've got this handled. We don't need any help." And within 3 months later, or 2 months later, he was on the phone with our supervisor trying to figure out a roadmap and what am I supposed to do and everything else. So everybody's going through this. I mean, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I just wanted to, because I was listening to what people were talking about, fees and such. When we started this process, we had to pay all the fees, all the impact fees. There was this long list. Everybody was in panic about rebuilding. Then it was, we only have to pay the impact fees on how much you add to the square footage of your house. And all this conversation takes place because they're trying to figure it out also. they're trying to figure, just like you were trying to figure out what's a priority. I mean, I remember, like Renee said, making lists, and I said, oh, I'm going to prioritize my list. Okay, what's a priority? Well, that's 1A, that's 1B, that's 1C. I mean, they're all a priority. So you have to pick and choose what your battle is. With the fees, it was the same thing. It was like, can I rebuild? Why do I go down the path of rebuilding unless I know that I can rebuild? Well, part of that is you need to just be patient, pump the brakes, and let things manifest and then react, because we're also reactive. You lose control and you want to have some sort of control. They ended up with our community with a fees that were, they removed all impact fees. Like I said, you could add 400 feet of square feet and it didn't cause any impact fees. If you had a 1,000 square foot house and you built a 2,000 square foot house, you would pay fees on that, only that 1,000 square feet that you added. So that's how our county did it. Every county is a little bit different. You know, you talk about property taxes. Our fire happened when property taxes were due. I think I got the first piece of mail I got when I stood in line for the post office was my property taxes. And how ironic that I got property taxes on a house that doesn't exist anymore. So the county had to go back and reevaluate. They looked at everybody's property, reduced everybody's property taxes because there's no, it's a piece of land. There's no structure on it. So that's just one little cog in that list that Renee talked about that you put on your list of where am I in? How do I judge this stuff? As far as the supervisors, yeah, my cousin's a supervisor and I'm lucky to have him. When we were evacuated, we were actually at his house. And I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of alcohol drank in that first month. And we would sit in, he'd come home at 11 and we'd sit out back and he'd tell me, I don't know, we're talking about, you know, how we're going to handle this as a community. We weren't cousins at that time. We were just community members. And he had our support and we had his support. And there was family, but he gave that same energy to everybody he met. And he really wants to hold the other supervisors accountable. So if you get one supervisor that is goal oriented, I reached out to Ryan Coonery. I butcher his name every time. I reached out to him right after we met the first time with Rebecca, and I said, introduced myself and told him who I was and told him who my cousin was and does he need help? And it took him about a week to respond to the email. And I know that because he probably has 1,000 of them right now. And I know that they're talking now. So if you can get that one guy that is engaged and the other supervisors see him, how engaged he is, they're either going to rise up or they're going to have their own set of people to answer to, because they want to know why their supervisor's doing all that and why my supervisor isn't doing what that supervisor's doing. We have that right now with our current fire. We just had the glass fire. And we have supervisors that are standing back and supervisors that are engaged, and you're going to have that. And I don't know if that answered your question, but I jumped around a lot.
Oh, no, that's great, Steve. I do want to put a shout out to James Gore, though. He is an unusually enthusiastic public servant. He's the guy who will pick up the phone to get it done. He doesn't always wait for somebody else to do it. He's very, I love working with James Gore, and he would have been the same regardless, but what didn't hurt that he was your cousin for sure. And he's so enthusiastic, and Coffee Park and Larkfield Wickiup were so organized that to this day, most people think that the majority of the damage from 2017 happened in James's district. And it didn't. It happened where I live in Sonoma Valley in District 1. And they didn't get as much help because, I mean, it's just a different style of leadership. I'm not criticizing anyone, but not everybody can go from like 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day, boots on the ground, to actually get it done. Oh, and Charles just put in the chat that James is like, he loves imperfect, relentless progress. And that's something to keep in mind. Like, you are going to get it wrong. We should go to the month 2 part now, because some of that we're covering about like the panic to get everything done. The emotional healing piece is huge, and it will take a long time, and it should be paid attention to. So maybe, go ahead, Pam. Go ahead.
Jennifer, this is Renee. I just want to go back to month one. Just one other point that really, really helped all of us. We actually went to like Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, and we registered like we were brides. So, because so many people want to know what they can do to help. So we did Pampered Chef, we did, and the stores actually closed down for us at night. And I highly encourage you, do not go by yourself. It's super emotional. I mean, you guys, you need needle and threads. You need safety pins. You don't even think of this. And we ended up having a really fun time in Target when they did this for us. We were crying, we were laughing, but do not do it by yourself. It's way, way too emotional, but it is healing also to do it with other people. And then we would send out emails. So we did an email template for everybody, and you put in all your links because you don't have that long for them to want to help you. And that again, with so many people underinsured, we figured we all saved about $10,000 to $20,000 by being registered. We went to Macy's. You register at Macy's. People want to help you. So that was just one thing I really want to encourage people. Keep passing that on to people to register, and then send emails or texts, and they can go in and they can help you purchase stuff.
That's a really good tip. And in Mark West Estates, they actually they bought solar in bulk when they were building their homes, and so they saved a lot of money. So that's,
ooh, that would have been good to do. I wish we would have thought of that one. That's awesome,
right? Well, you know, you're gonna get there's no way. So let's give some months to. Go ahead.
We don't have any sun. It's a redwood tree thing. It's a redwood tree thing. We don't have any sun.
Oh gosh. Well, you know, what about?
I hate to say this, you have more sun now than you did before. And we had sun. We had limited sun, but this is, so everybody, we're gonna have to do solar panels anyway because it's a state law to do a certain amount. But to let you all know, when our house, I never thought solar would work at my house. I had 27 solar panels on my house. It dropped my PG&E, even with the limited amount of sunshine I got, from $350 to $400 a month to $150 a month with the air conditioner running during the hot summer months. So consider it, look at it, think about it. And it's like I told my agent, I'm trying to be really strong here, and Antonia knows that. She knows I've had some moments. But I told my agent, you know, y'all can't drop me after all of this. I have the defendable space y'all asked for. Plus.
Thank you. I'm looking in the chat and I see the, another thing that happens is the panic about the cost of rebuilding with regard to lumber prices. And because we had so many fires, we just lost in Sonoma County last week over 300 homes. And then in Napa County, another 300, I think it's like 700 total just in our recent glass fire. And I do recall the lumber conversation happens after every single fire. It does fluctuate, but don't let that drive any of your decisions. And Renee says that Home Depot gave discounts, so that's great. Rebecca, did you want to introduce someone?
Oh, no, not necessarily, except that I had forgotten to introduce Pamela, who's also with Coffee Strong, and mostly just, she's been such an incredible resource for us over the last month, and really grateful. And she probably is very modest, but she's just incredible. She also is a survivor. And Pamela, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself or speak to any of this, but I know you've helped us so much so far. I'm so grateful for you.
Hopefully I can help a little bit. And for me, my part, I just wanted to say every volunteer that you get, you know, Coffee Strong came together and nobody applied to be a volunteer. You showed up, you were a volunteer, and we all had unique things to offer. And so what do we have? Steve's an electrician, and Annie knows everybody everywhere and is a great communicator. We had people who were teachers who really could understand what children needed. We had people who were in, Jeff Okrepke worked in the insurance industry. And I had a lot of background in community and communication, as well as a teacher, being able to explain things that are complicated and try to make it simple. So it's going to be unexpected what each person contributes. Another thing I wanted to say is I became part of a collaborative that's a county-wide thing called the Sonoma Community Resilience Collaborative that's dedicated to everyone's mental and physical well-being. And that's something that should not be put off till later. Because it's really hard to think clearly. It's really hard to make hard decisions and to feel calm and actually keep your blood pressure and your muscles and all those kind of things healthy and strong through this long haul, unless you're really reserving like 20% of your time on this recovery and making sure you're healthy. So don't wait till later for that. Try to have something available for people from the beginning.
And you might take a look at I didn't want to have too many, that's such a good point. Not to overwhelm you all, but they did do something here called the it was the Wildfire Mental Health Collaborative, and there are funds that your county can request. Your county has to request them from the state. I believe it's called a HOPE grant, and that can be used to train like yoga instructors, exercise, and people in trauma-informed care, and you have been collectively traumatized, and that will manifest itself in many different ways, and the path forward to stay healthy is different as it can be. For certain people it's meditation, for others it's running, whatever it is. The nice thing about what they did was the Wildfire Mental Health Collaborative found a way to not only serve like from children to seniors, and gave some people a sense of community who maybe were a little didn't have the exact same skill sets as like the leaders of Coffee Strong, but they wanted to participate. You have that self-care aspect of it. Debbie Mason, who really spearheaded that move to Florida about a year ago, I guess, but I could still get her on a call. And I would still put her on a Zoom, and we're still in contact. And so I'm more than happy to look at that. But there is money out there, but your county has to ask for it.
So I just want to tag one thing on there. Whoever in your group potentially is going to be interacting with the long-term recovery group, standing up disaster case management and getting as much federal, state, and philanthropic dollars into disaster case management, because your residents are going to need to find out where to go for resources, whether you guys have 211 down there or something else. It's taken us a very long time, and we still have a backlog of fire survivors that are wanting to access disaster case management. And within that, those resources, mental health and things like that are so crucial. So whoever within your group or whoever you know that's interacting with the long-term recovery groups that's being stood up, disaster case management, mental health has to be, a ton of energy needs to be put towards that right away. Even before you have housing committee meetings, those can go on in parallel, but a lot of effort needs to go into that to get people talking about it and working through this.
And if I may say, what you'll see is that the helpers are the last people to ask for help. And so you all are here because in some ways you are naturally helpers. And I know this from personal experience. Like after about a year, I had, my blood pressure was higher. I had gained weight. I was like always like that all the time. And so I had to start aggressively taking care of my mental health. And because you are all helpers, you're going to be last on your list. But do put your oxygen mask on first. It is such a cliche, but it really is true, like taking care of your mental health. Charles is a runner, and I think that's probably helped him. And I don't know what your coping mechanism is. Alcohol does work, but not all the way through. You got to balance it out. So maybe now is a good time for you all just to ask questions. I'm going to go to gallery view, and we're scheduled until 3. If you need that long, we'll go that long. If you don't, then we won't. But maybe we can just ask. We can do an ask anything, like a Reddit. Antonia.
Thank you. First of all, thank you guys for being here. It feels nice to connect with people that know what this feels like. So I appreciate you. You know, one thing that's coming up for me, like, you know, my role in the group that I started is to kind of inspire people. My admin team has been amazing at doing the technicals, but I feel like my role is to kind of bring people into the conversation. And something that's coming up for me for that is, how do I keep the people who didn't lose their homes engaged with us? You know, by and large, so in Boulder Creek, we were hit pretty hard. My neighborhood was decimated. But they're just these little pockets, and you can drive through Boulder Creek and not see anything and not know that anything ever even happened here, right? And I think it's for those people that don't have this loss, it can be really, I think in the beginning, their hearts are in the right place. They're like, I want to help, I want to help. And then time passes and they're not in the trenches with us the same as in the beginning. And I know our community, like, I love Boulder Creek and I love our community. I love our citizens, but I just want to know, like, what's the best way to keep those people engaged with helping us rebuild this community?
So
I think really tough one.
Yeah, I was going to say Renee did an excellent job with that in 2007, with the women and the men's support group pulling in people who wanted to help and keeping them engaged the whole time. And Annie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. We did have one gal who did she broke off. She's in Coffee Strong, but she did a standing home section for people who were affected by the fire. You know, the homes around them were burnt. They may have had smoke damage, whatever, but she just dealt with it from that point of view and what kind of effect it had on them to have all this building going on around them, the ash around them, the mental health of that. But engaging, I'm a little stumped on keeping them engaged with you for your recovery. I don't know that we really had that.
Well, you do have it because you have me.
Okay, you know what? We did a fantastic job. And you guys don't have to worry about it because you guys have her now too.
So you guys, a couple things that we did in San Diego. So we had our Fired Up Sisters group. We had about 600 women in there. And like I say, they all had their own little gifts. But we formed the Burned Out Brothers for the men. And we would organize things like baseball games, and everybody could bring a friend that wasn't part of the fire. So they could keep their old friends and encourage that. We then formed a group for the kids because I had 3 young teenagers, and they actually still talk about it. They're in their late 20s now, but like one event was serving tea at a senior home where it had nothing. And what I found with the kids, they just want to do stuff that they don't have to think and talk about it. But so we would just find real fun events. One event, we played croquet with the kids and the parents came out, but they always had to invite somebody that wasn't affected. And what got us thinking about it, with my kids, they had friends in the neighborhood. Say they had 8 friends, 7 of them lost their homes. This one kid did not. And so even the parents of this family, as well as the kids, went through depression because their house didn't burn down and they had to drive through the burned out neighborhood the whole time. So being aware of what these other people are going through, yes, what go through is a tragedy, but that's how we kept people engaged, is we would do events. And then when I have pictures of tons of people coming in helping sift through stuff. Include them. And it's really, we're so stressed out that you don't even think about it. But if you leave yourself open to having people help, and, we would do potlucks for sifting through ashes. We would do potluck we had parties for everything. We'd pour the slab, we'd have a party, so we kept.
I do think we have to, Renee, I think one of the things we have to look at, because I'm getting, it is going to be different in the age of COVID, and we're going to learn from you how it is that you do this recovery without doing it in the same type of way. It is going to be different, but we would certainly be a resource for you. And I can talk to you about the model of Rebuild North Bay. It doesn't have to be a formal, thing like ours is, but just what the model is. But I hear you, Renee, like nobody ever looked at me and said, you shouldn't be in this room because you didn't lose your home. They were relieved that I had the energy to be in the room with them. And so I never felt excluded. I mean, I obviously clearly knew the difference for sure.
But a lot of it you can do on Zoom now too, where, I do a ton of stuff on Zoom, bringing groups together. So, but yeah, we can have that. I'd love to help you on that conversation, because it is important to keep those people part of the group. It really is. So, and it's being creative, thinking outside the box, definitely.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm looking in the chats. And, I see, Kirsten, your hand is up.
So as I listen and think about how to keep momentum going and in a positive direction as people rebuild, and also seeing all the wisdom of you guys who have been through it already, and this question about how to do this during COVID, what occurs to me is that if we could figure out how the groups broke out into little action nodules, I guess I would call them, we could create a monthly Zoom meeting for each module. So if there was someone who wanted to work on codes and permitting, maybe a nodule forms around that person of everyone who's interested in codes and rebuild and permitting. And then if there's another nodule, I know someone's here about wildlife and preserving wildlife and the natural environment, maybe there's a little subgroup that forms its own little Zoom meeting support group. And I would picture that those Zoom meetings could be both sort of a support group, like you're getting together with people who have been through what you've been through, and you're feeling useful. I always quote Thomas the Tank Engine, who only wanted to be a truly useful engine. And so you feel like you're being useful because you're working on your little area. And then, but you're leaning on all the other nodules, all the other little Zoom groups.
Yep.
So that's how I picture it could work.
Yep, you're spot on. That's exactly how it can work.
Yeah, and
bear in mind it's going to work differently for the concept of breaking it down into manageable pieces is the most important thing. And it looked a little bit different for Paradise than it did for Santa Rosa, but conceptually though, it's the same. And I think there are so many people on this call who have actually gone through that. And I do want to make, I'm going to go to you, Valerie, and I do want to make sure that if you have just to start the conversation on, somebody asked about how they did some fundraisers around music, which actually Zoom is good for. Then there's the question is who's going to pay for your Zoom license? It has to be big enough for the big enough meetings. Right. And that's when you apply for those mini grants. So you can do 10 Zoom licenses with a webinar for about $2,500. During COVID, we gave out about $40,000 worth of Zoom grants alone. So you're like your local community foundation, ask for that mini grant of $2,500 or $5,000. Like it's very easy for them to deploy smaller amounts of money.
Right. Sorry.
Do they have to become a nonprofit to receive that though?
So sorry.
I'll answer that while you do that. In our case, no, we don't care. That's one of the beauties of Rebuild is that we just need a W-9. And so like when you guys wanted to protest the city or something, like we just paid for your permit to do that. But you weren't a 501c3 then, but you just have since become one. Same with Larkfield Resiliency. But when Vita needs something, like we just bought backpacks for all of the, and so we just need a W-9. There has to be that kind of organization that has that sort of flexibility because we're not wedded to it. If 5 neighbors are going to benefit from it, then we're going to pay for it if we can.
So yeah, so I was going to say two parts, just to not to put the brakes on it, but to hold before anybody runs down a path. So when the long-term recovery group stands up, in Santa Cruz. You'll see who's got that. I will say for a lot of the topics that Kirsten was mentioning, those are, UP already has those groups that we typically host. We've got our Zoom licensing, we've got that. So those that are in our wheelhouse, we're happy to put out there. We've just hired our local coordinator for Santa Cruz. We'll be bringing that out and be able to facilitate those with mentors from prior disasters. So Renee is one of our, what they call the kitchen cabinet of prior disaster survivors who are gonna help other volunteers moderate those and be part of that conversation, and obviously bringing in other experts as well. So some of those things will be happening soon. So just to throw that out there, and there's going to be a lot of collaboration that's going to happen in this space. We're not quite there yet, and I think Renee said it earlier. It's you know, take your time. You're making very big decisions, and so keep all these ideas, put them in that brain dump of a notebook. And then there'll be opportunities to pull them out, but it's, you know, we can't do everything at once. It can't be all things to all people. And so you've got your normal life, you've got the rebuilding life, you've got your, I'm an insurance expert life. I'm going to be a contractor. Thank you, Steve. Steve's going to give everybody a brain transplant so they know exactly what all this means. You know, you've got to shop, you've got to do all these different things. And so keep track of those ideas. And then leverage everybody who walks in the room. Because what Jennifer's talking about, that fundraising, Renee was fabulous with this. In 07, they had all of these kids, not just the kids who lost their homes, but all the kids who had to evacuate during through the flames, who came back to a mostly destroyed neighborhood. And so they advocated on behalf of everybody, and they ended up getting funding to have counselors at the impacted schools for 2 years, Renee. 2 years to have counselors dedicated to kids and trauma from that, which made a huge difference. We had experimental therapy. So we had a church that went to their national group, the UMCOR, and got a grant to do EMDR, which is at the time was more experimental. Now it's proven post-traumatic stress disorder treatment, and able to walk people through and get them out of that state of crisis every time they saw flickering lights or no lights, darkness, all of those things are opportunities, but before you go and fundraise for yourselves, make sure you leverage as much as you can out of everybody in the room. Coffee Strong is its own nonprofit, I understand, and they've got expertise. You've got, you're gonna have a lot of partners in the room that can help make it together. Our big challenge is, I think Charles mentioned earlier, is getting that long-term recovery group up and running so you can see what's on the table. And then, like Annie said, and Renee, it's leveraging Jody, leveraging everybody together so that you've got that collective voice that you can speak with authority to your elected officials, to the media, to the community in general, and say, these are the needs we have. What can you do to help? And always ask. It never hurts to ask.
It's actually the most important thing you can ask is, what do you need and how can we help? And that's actually a rebuild. That's how we start all of our projects, conversations, rabbit holes. And if we can figure out what you all need, with our local community, then we are like, okay, well, we'll try. That's how we got the wall built and then a mile of common fencing. We didn't want to be wall and fence builders, but that's what the community asked for and wanted and needed that helped them save money. So that's what we delivered, and that's what made a difference to them. And that's what matters. The most important thing is what is going to make the difference for your community, for people to want to stay. I know that I'm going to go back to a gallery view. I see a hand up. Is that Jody? Hi, Jody.
Let me unmute. Hello, everybody. Thank you again. It's so nice to see your faces again. I just wanted to speak to some of the points that have come up about people who haven't lost their homes and whatnot. SC Relief did create what is now, because we all are caring individuals, and I haven't lost my home, but I was born and raised in Boulder Creek, Ben Lomond, Felton, and that is where my childhood memories are. And so we are just continuing to try to reach out and make, join with other partners and find people who can bring different skill sets to SC Relief to offer, legal advice, mental health. I mean, like you said, every skill set possible that could be a key player in helping survivors work through their individual challenges and, eventually schedule workshops. And like I'm been talking to the Tiny Pine Foundation, who builds tiny homes, and just try to bring as many options to the table as possible so that these folks feel like they do have a community that is lifting them up, in a supportive way, and bringing people like you in to answer their questions and whatnot. It's just, I want them to feel like, yes, we didn't lose our homes, but we're here, we're still here. Reach out to us. The holidays are coming. There's a group creating like a adopt a family holiday. I mean, there's all kinds of things happening behind the scenes because there's so many people in our community that have wonderful hearts and want to give, and they have so much to offer. It's hard to ask for help. I know that, but that's why we're trying to build this website so that people can just go check it out and say, oh gosh, they're offering this, and and they don't have to reach out physically and ask a person to help them, but they'll see a platform where there's just all of this offering. And so I just wanted to say that's what our intention is.
I love that, Jody. I think that disaster is an exercise in vulnerability, and that can be really uncomfortable, but also not such a bad thing for me to have to lean on you or you to have to lean on me, especially during these times. And it's just, I'll be watching how you guys do this in the age of COVID, but I just echo what you're saying, that you cannot lose. It's okay not to lose your home, and to still step in and step up, and to step up for 3 years is how long I've been in this space. And it is the best work I've ever done in my life. Like it still makes me cry, to see,
Right.
Or just the emotional connection, the people that I meet, the quality of the people who step up to serve in a disaster. Like I'll hang out with you all day long for the rest of my life. Like it's really, it's kind of a big deal.
And to know that there is momentum happening behind the scenes. You may not be seeing it as a survivor, and you're dealing with all of these steps that you have to, keep up with the FEMA, and following up with all the paperwork, and, dealing with your children, and then having to have a next step. And even just to get up in the morning and, pull your stuff together and do it again. And just to know that there's momentum behind this effort. Like SC Relief, that's the intention of it, is to just continue to build partnerships and momentum and get people participating on the website, and checking in and monitoring who needs what, and where we can help, and matching skill sets and resources. I mean, it's going to be evolving throughout this process. So that's just what I wanted to offer.
I love it. We actually built a website, and it took 10 months to build post-disaster. And the mistake that we made was we spent too much money on it. And by the time it was ready, it was not what our survivors needed. So it's what they needed at first if it was ready to go on day one. But a year later, when it debuted, it really wasn't that useful. And it was, and you can look at our website. There's portals for builders and residents and community, and how to advocate for yourself, and it was not as relevant. And I will drop in the chat, or if Melissa, if you could do it for me, Neighbors Together, Strong and Resilient. That's Vita Iskander, a fire survivor who is just a gem of a human being on all levels, and she is sort of no nonsense, and she's very good with insurance, and everyone from our area is very familiar with her, and she has like the 5 steps immediately following a wildfire. And she's also a good person just to call. Sometimes she drops swear words a lot, but that makes me like her more. So you have to be prepared for that, because I really enjoy that about Vita. But we will drop that in the chat.
So Jody, this is Renee. First of all, thank you for what you do. You mentioned something that I completely forgot about that was so powerful for our people, was the adoptive family. And I am telling you, we have so many fired up sister gals that would be happy to adopt a family down here and even mentor them. But because our fired up sisters group, they still send out gift cards to people that have been through fires and everything. I think last year we sent out close to 600 of them. But
Yeah.
Please connect with me, because that adopt a family, we've got Thanksgiving and Christmas. That could be one of the most powerful things you do to connect people together. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Well, and Renee, thanks for bringing that up, because the other thing that happened with that was the faith centers pulled together and pulled, you know how they'll do the pastoral counseling so for people for grief, and what they did is they paired people up. So volunteers, keeping the volunteers, people who want to help, who didn't lose their home, keeping them engaged. One of the things they did is gave everybody who wanted one a community mentor. And it was somebody that you could bounce things off of, vent when you couldn't vent to your spouse. And they were walking alongside you just to kind of help, because that fog lasts for a while of you know, tracking everything. And a lot of times you'll have a conversation with someone. You're going to find this when you get off this today, you know, there's too many good ideas. And if you're not writing them down, like was shared earlier, you're going to forget them. And that's somebody who can walk alongside you and help keep that resource management and just be that sounding board and just, you know, a connection with life before. So that was a good resource we had. And they lasted for about 1.5 years, I think, right, Renee? They were through RBCPC?
No, actually up to 3 years.
3 years, okay.
They were around even when people got back into their homes. It was amazing. It was amazing, the friendships that were developed, but very strong for 2 years, and it went on into 3.
Thank you. Hey, Ann, Coffee is Strong people, and Steve, Pam, can you talk about what you guys did in your first Christmas? Because it was really moving, and the press loved it. So moving comes first, but secondary gain is the press was like all about it. It was really sweet.
We actually didn't do it. Let's start there. We had a couple people in the community. We had John Allen and Ronnie Duvall, who then proceeded to go to Paradise to try to help cheer them up and let them know there was somebody there. But they basically decorated. They went through Coffee Park, through the main streets, and we had lights on everything. We had trees lit up. We had Christmas trees all over the place. People would go and pick up a Christmas tree and put it on their lot and decorate it. They had people put, if they still had a fireplace, which most people did, they put stockings on it. And it just brought back another sense of community, another reason to want to go back home. And it was pretty phenomenal. The next year got even crazier, and Ronnie and John, we had a circus for Christmas. We had food trucks with free food. We had coffee from Starbucks and hot chocolate. We had the emergency helicopter come in and land in the middle of our park. We had snow and kids played in it and made snowmen. It was truly phenomenal. Now, you guys can't do this because you don't have a Ronnie and a John, but you can do the first stage, which was, you know, have somebody donate some Christmas trees and create your Christmas, create your world, create your community. And it was a great community builder. And I'm sure Steve will have another perspective and Pam will have another perspective on this.
Let's do Steve and then Pam and then Tiffany. Thank you, Ann.
You know, and Annie's right. So our fire, October 8th, 9th, depending on how you want to look at it. So we had cleanup start in around Thanksgiving in Coffee Park. So once FEMA moved in, they picked Coffee Park as kind of a starting point because we're very flat. It's easy to figure out how this is going to work. So when cleanup started, so by the time Christmas rolled around, you know, we had a fair amount of lots that were cleaned up and a fair amount of lots that were not. 1,422 homes condensed in a pretty tight little footprint. So it wasn't just Annie's exactly right. It was the Christmas trees. It was the building camaraderie. It was where our community started to rebuild. It had nothing to do with actual nails and hammers. It had to do with, knowing your neighbor. At this point in my junction, I go to the grocery store. It takes me half an hour to go to the grocery store. I used to take 5 minutes because you run into all your neighbors now, and how are you doing, and what's going on, and how's your kids, and did you get your curtains in yet, or whatever. I made that up. But but Christmas was a good way to build that relationship. The debris contractors who will work day and night, and whether it's private or hired by FEMA, were huge supporters. Our Christmas was funded by the debris contractors. They wanted to help. So you pull them in as being John Allen. They're talking about John Allen. John Allen was a large builder in Coffey Park. We had 3 large builders that they took footprints of houses, and you could build this house on your property. So it was another way that building took place. But they were, they got leveraged also. Hey, you're cleaning up our neighborhood. How about donating to the Christmas in Coffey Park? And it really helped build the trust with those debris contractors, because they know they're cleaning up for people they just met. And there's that personal connection then.
Stephen, and that's why when Ashbrook called me and offered me $500,000, the only reason why I think they said yes, I was like, well, they said, what would you do with it? I was like, I'd rebuild the Coffey Park walls. And they said, oh, we love them. Okay. So that's just it also worked out from the media part to the relationship part to all that.
And you're right. I mean, and you asked about how do you keep the media in attentive. This is how you do it. One of the biggest debris contractors, he passed away since then, Glenn Gelati, but Glenn put on Thanksgiving for every debris contractor, whether they worked for him or they worked for another competitor, in a giant gymnasium, and gave now obviously COVID's a different world now, but a big turkey Thanksgiving buffet, because all those guys were working 12-hour days, and it was just a gift to the community. And that's because he felt that empowerment to help the community. So there's going to be different phases in this, but that's how we took it. And I think that was a great way to provide some healing. I know that John and Ronnie ran up to Paradise, and they put a tree right on the corner out there at the entry, and it didn't go over very well, I heard, but they snuck in behind enemy lines and put it up there and left. So it was
absolutely amazing, and we loved it. The law enforcement, because town was still locked down, didn't like it very much.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you have to break the rules a little bit. So that's all I have to say on that one.
I just wanted to share something about that. I remember the first holiday after our fire was Halloween. And I know people immediately talked about bringing carved pumpkins and trying to surround the park at Coffey Park. And then we all realized that it might be toxic, and that didn't happen. After we were able to get some of that cleared and EPA clearance and felt like we could go back there, I realized how important it was for people to go back there. And because none of you are there anymore. You're all scattered everywhere, living in different places, and how important it was to have reasons to go back. And that's probably true in Santa Cruz area too. In your fires, is nobody's there now. But if you could have a reason that you're back and you still belong to that place, and together you're caring for it. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Stars of Hope, but Stars of Hope is a nonprofit based in New York City that started after 9/11. And their whole mission is to hang beautiful hand-painted stars that survivors and caring people paint for others, and hang stars to be symbols of we're coming back, we're going to heal, we're going to survive. And even to just have a moment where you're going and hanging stars on one another's properties, not your own, but share a star with someone else so they know that nobody's forgotten about them. There's something amazing and simple but powerful about that.
Oh, I'm so glad you included Stars of Hope because it was such a simple idea and it's such a loving, kind thing to do. So I have a couple of, I really appreciate it, a couple of program notes. Tiffany's going to talk next, and then we'll have about 15 minutes after that. And I wanted to do next steps. And I know that with Charles, he has a lot of knowledge about tree removal and some policy changes that he's worked on that are going to help you all. And let's do next steps though, so that we have an action plan for what's next. Tiffany, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, this is such a great call. I've just got to acknowledge everybody here on this call. You all are just, give me a second. You guys are all just so amazing. I'm so inspired by everything you're talking about and sharing. I'm like, no, do not get distracted with your mission. I want to hang stars. I want to have a potluck. I mean, just like, oh my God, I can't even believe it. Okay, so pulling myself back to what we're focused on is, and Rebecca's incredible, and she's been such a resource of really of community and structure and connection with different groups like yourselves, like Coffee Strong and all of the groups that are on here. So I just want to say that we've started a group called Wildfire Protectors Corps, and we're a group of volunteers who, well, at this moment, I mean, the intention is we are a group of volunteers who will support primarily elderly, low income and disabled folks before, during, and after wildfires. Before with fire abatement, creating defensible space around their homes, you know, working with like kind of the action arm of the fire department and fire safe councils, and going out with them, helping people take those recommendations and put them into action, possibly building. I like the idea of building like neighborhoods. I love the idea of like block captains and zone captains. So I'd like to talk more maybe individually with people that could help us create that. But yeah, almost creating kind of like how Neighborhood Watch goes out and creates a group to neighbors helping neighbors. So we are a neighbors helping neighbors group. During wildfires, it would be really having people that animal control and it was equine evac and animal control. We were able to help animals out of these areas, but we just didn't have enough of them, and a lot of animals were left behind. So we'd like to prevent that, you know, in the future, and have our people trained up, those who are interested, so they can go and pull animals out of these areas quickly and effectively. But now at this moment, the after the fire situation, what we're really hearing is that, you know, there's a lot of structure burns, the actual structure burns that are, you know, they're perched above the watersheds and waterways, and all that toxic ash is going to just, you know, during first rains, it's just going to wash down into these waterways. We have an endangered species of fish. We don't want that. So none of us want that. So so what we want to do now at this moment, and what we're forming, is our groups of volunteers. We actually just sent out our first MMS broadcast, which is essentially like a text blast, because I mainly have text numbers of everybody who registered to volunteer with us. So we had like just over 900 or around 900 people who responded to a call to action that I'd put out on Facebook, and they registered in this form and said they wanted to help. So now we're actually going, you know, we've learned so much in these last 6 weeks since our fire here, that what we could and couldn't do, and what would be effective, and what would be, you know, actually not do more damage than good. What we've really got it down to is actually getting out there and filling and laying down absorbent compost, what they call compost socks. They're like big long tubes. They're not waddles, they're compost socks. These big tubes filled with different materials that are absorbent, putting them around the perimeter, and also before culverts, or in the culverts, to absorb all of those toxins before they just run freely down into the watershed. So that's
I'm
what
sorry
we're out to do, and contaminant containment.
I just wanted to make sure that you connected with Rebecca. We had she had an ecology called yesterday or the day before. I think maybe it was yesterday. Every day seems really long right now. And had some great connections and some good advice from people who understand how to do this, like in the way you do, but the way that I don't. Like I didn't know how to spell wattle for sure until that conversation. And so we have some good resources for you. So definitely hook up with Rebecca on that. She is connected with the people who did the boots on the ground, and somebody else who knows how to get a lot of navigate grants, who's on our board, Dr. Lisa McKaylee of Pepperwood Preserve. So I'm going to actually go to, here's my next question, which actually perfectly leads to my next question for next steps. And Charles, it seems like that debris removal and trees is probably pretty high on your list, or is that what you'd like to do next? And if so, we've got people right here on this call. Charles, do you want to pipe in for a second about, sorry, apparently I'm the one who should be on mute.
All right, I'll jump in real quick, Jennifer. I think this is a whole nother call when you get into debris removal. One of the best things that the Coffee Strong, I mean, the fact that you guys showed up while there was still smoke in the air after our fire, I'm eternally grateful for the rest of my life for you guys. And you came up another time and you sat in our community, and now we're gonna have to do it under Zoom, unfortunately, but you sat there for 2 or 3 hours and answered questions about debris removal, which is where we were at. So I wanna extend that offer to you guys, that at any point, if Jennifer can coordinate a call, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but debris removal is an emotional, painful time, but there are things that you will wanna do to advocate for your community to make sure that debris removal goes as well as it possibly can. And we learned a lot. And unfortunately, debris removal was honed in fires before us, and it was more honed during ours. And they did a better job than what we heard for the most part of the stories coming out of the fires in Lake County and also Sonoma. But one thing that I want to just leave this, and it'll be a whole nother call, but as you guys get into the debris removal world, our fire is the first one where FEMA is covering tree removal. And that is a precedent that's now set. And if they mention that they are not taking trees that impact public roads, and we advocated for private roads too that have public service, garbage service, this is a whole nother conversation, a whole nother call, but I want you to be prepared that as a community, you are going to need to advocate very hard and get your federal representatives, your local, your state, everybody rowing in the exact same direction. It took us almost, I want to say 8 to 10 months to get FEMA to recognize the need to do tree removal. It still hasn't started in our community. We're almost 2 years post-fire. When you guys are advocating for debris removal, all hazards that could impact human life in returning to rebuild, everything that you can get covered under there, but basically it's trees and the debris. Make sure you guys collectively, not individually, but come together as a group. That's where the long-term recovery group, every committee was rowing in the same direction. Every organization, town, county, everybody recognized. We have 350,000 trees still in the town of Paradise that are dead or dying that could fall on the public right-of-way that need to still come out. And they're still squabbling amongst the contractors and getting this stood up. Do not back down. You have to fight for this if they will not offer it in the beginning, but you can get it accomplished, but you have to do it together. And like a whole nother call on debris removal, I just want to leave that with you guys that as these conversations come up.
We can set that up. Steve, I see Steve is a contractor also, so get in there.
And I just wanted to add also, you know, I sat at our local assistance center last night and helped out with our glass fire. And there's a lady that I know that worked the table, and she, just to give you some ideas of figures, she lost her home in the Tubbs fire. She has 12 acres. It was heavily dense trees. She is 90% cleaned all the trees off this property. Manzanita, oak, pines, dead, beetled trees, all this stuff. She spent $250,000 so far on tree removal. Her in-laws have 65 acres. They're about 60% done with their property, and they have $400,000 in costs so far for tree removal. So, I mean, what Charles is saying, tree removal, you know, that's where the big difference between urban and rural is that I had a lemon tree and a couple small trees. I mean, mine wasn't anything. Because they don't have because this all happened so fast, Paradise kind of paved the road for that. And that's a great thing to know, because you have a voice now if there's a precedent set.
Exactly. And so one of the things we can do, so let's do this for next steps. We are going to set up, I guess, we will set up a 1 hour or however long you need it to be for next week, if you would like, on debris removal. Remember, I'm going to be in your community from the 19th to the 22nd in person, safely in an RV with my husband, my dog. But we can also set the Zoom up then too. There's no reason why in the town hall, I was talking to Rebecca about that's very safe and outdoors, why I made sure I actually bought a 32-inch TV in case I need to do Zooms on the run. And there's no reason why we couldn't do it then. And we can teach you collectively how to advocate too. It's one of the things that we had to learn. And we do. Charles went with us to DC last October. And it was a very proud moment sitting across from him and the Speaker of the House. And there's only like 5 or 6 of us in this room, and he's explaining what it's, the challenges to Nancy Pelosi of recovery and rebuilding. And then with their own, and then Kevin, we've had very good luck with leadership. They're behind the scenes, they can work together, but also we want to change the way that FEMA approaches disasters. So we meet with FEMA, the USDA, the FCC, HUD. FEMA was largely set up to serve wind and rain events and not these massive wildfires. So they are willing to engage in education, but the more voices that come to the table, the more regional we are, the more collective we are in explaining the barriers and the constraints, the more successful we'll be, and the more they actually want to hear about it. So that's where the influence with FEMA comes in, and we're happy to talk about that. So it is at 2:51. So did you all want to meet next week, and what will work for you? And it's quiet.
That's like herding cats, Jennifer. But is maybe we can send a doodle out to this group, and I don't know if people want to put their email into the chat so we don't lose it, and then we can send out a doodle and get everybody's time for next week. And thank you so much, Jennifer and Charles, for being willing to coordinate that for us. We so appreciate that.
Well, so the doodle, though, I'm going to ask you to do the doodle on your end, and then we're going to doodle up with you after that. And so what I'll do is, it's good to have, I think the Coffee Strong people too are great on that call as well, for sure. So let's just, we'll send that out, and then Melissa will work with you. I'm next week figuring out what to put in an RV, but I'm happy to jump on a call as long as you need. Great. So that would be great. Just put all of your emails. I can save those in the chat, and I assume that Rebecca probably has them, and Antonia. And those need to be compiled for sure. We're happy to do this. This is how we heal.
And I see we have Beth Dyer also on the call, and she mentioned about Public Works. She's been a wonderful advocate and has a lot of background in the area of erosion control, water shed management, etc. So just wanted to make sure to mention her to be there.
And Kirsten, so you're saying that we will heal? No, you will be on the path to healing. Your life will never be the same. So the normal does not exist anymore, but a different type of normal is possible.
You will develop.
And you've also joined the club too. We were kind of an elite club 3 years ago, so we're not so much VIPs anymore.
No.
Well, you're very much VIPs.
Well, last week we felt like we were gonna, triple down on our club, quadruple down. Last week it was like, oh God, you just feel the beast rushing at you again. It's terrible.
Hey, you guys, this is Renee. One of the biggest blessings that come out of this, because you don't come out the same, but I have more wonderful friends that I've met through all of this. So do not discard these wonderful people you meet, and just be grateful for one thing every day.
Yep.
I think that's a great place to end. I really appreciate and love that so much. And I do reiterate that I call Charles my brother from another mother, my disaster brother. And I loved working with Steve, and I just met the most amazing people. And I'm sure that that's going to be the case for each of you. And there will be squabbles along the way. But, you know, luckily somebody's on the phone with you and just tells you not to be so dramatic, Steve. Because Steve told me that once, and he was right, because I was mad. See, and you work it all out, and then you move on. So we will follow up. I'm going to save the chat. If you haven't yet put your email in there, please do. And remember that, you know, relationships can be person to person too. We in no way are taking, or owning any of this. We're just here to facilitate a better, faster, safer, greener recovery for you. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to save this chat. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, guys.